Stacy and Chris are here to, along with Matt and Dan, to talk about the report that was sent out and posted yesterday on pre and post award issues, policy behind that. So we want to keep this super informal and just kind of go through some of the individual topics, trying to keep it optimistic and look at what we can change policy-wise within the system while we'll be impacted by modernization and whatnot to help our research, support, and infrastructure. So with that, I will pass the stage to Stacy.
Sure, thank you. I'm Stacy Pearson, Vice President for Finance and Administration. I've been at Washington State a little bit over 2 years now, and I think I've presented to some of you on various fiscal things and all of that. So pre and post award, there have been a lot of changes at WSU over the years, in particular the significant growth in grants. That's a good thing. But there is no doubt that it's been a challenge for us to keep up with the administrative activities that support grants and federal awards. So today we want to talk about some of the changes that we've made, some of the improvements we hope to see through modernization. As most of you know, we are doing a lot of things by paper and manually that just isn't working very well for really both the complexity of many of our grants, but also the volume. And I will also say this is an area, even in the past university work at other universities, it's also an area that has pretty high stress level in the work that is being done by a lot of the staff because it's large volumes of transactions. So we usually experience quite a bit of turnover, and we're trying to find ways to alleviate that and get enough positions into place while we're going through both modernization and fiscal recovery. So it is a bit of a challenge, but this is very, very important. And I do think that some of the improvements that we've made on both the pre and post award side are very helpful and particularly laudable given those challenges that I just mentioned. So we're going to want to hear from you about your particular challenges. Again, because we are in the modernization and there is grants processing in the Workday product. Will it fix everything from day one? It will not, but it's going to be a good step above manual processing that we're doing now. And then, as we go along, we can continue to make additional improvements. So maybe we can have some questions later, or now if you want, and then Chris, if you want to say a few words.
Yeah, hi everyone. Chris Keem, Vice President for Research. We're pleased to be here today, and I just want to compliment a couple things Stacy said. First of all, Greg, I'd like to thank you for bringing these things to our attention. And just to be clear, Stacy's organization and the Office of Research are completely dedicated to helping you, the faculty, get your grants submitted and executed. We understand, obviously, the importance of this. And as Stacy said, Matt and Dan, who you're going to hear with, have been working together on this problem for some time. I mean, the narrative hold policy and some of the changes that Matt and colleagues have made in finance already, I think, have really improved things. So we welcome this opportunity to keep the dialogue going and continue to improve. I mean, in research administration, it really is all about that, continuous improvement and how we support our faculty and staff, whether it's this or animal experiments or the IRB or all these other things that are required to keep the enterprise going. We just want to get your input and just do better all the time. So thanks for the opportunity and look forward to further discussion.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dan Norquist, the Associate Vice President for Research. I'm in Leidy, and there's the first set of slides are kind of on the pre, and then we'll move over to Matt and talk about the post stuff, and then we'll kind of work out together some, a discussion. So we wanted to take just a minute to ensure everybody understood what we do, okay, and this will be quite brief. Proposal and award processing is the central hub for all of the proposals all across the system. whether that's in Spokane, Vancouver, or Tri-Cities, or all the extension units all across the state and the research centers. But the ORSO thing is more than just pre-award, so I just want to kind of let you know that. We work on strategic initiative implementation, which many of you have interacted with Derek Brown. He's kind of moved away from the proposal submission and award acceptance stuff and into helping me with strategic initiatives, which is specifically helping Chris implement things. We work on faculty support and online tools, so the Office of Research IT group reports to me, and so we've been actually worked well with them to help us on some issues related to making improvements associated with the pre and post-award activities. And then there's all kinds of other university and Office of Research administrative support we do. We run 15 or 16 working groups. We help a lot of these different committees. So it's more than just proposal and award processing, but the proposal and award processing is the thing that really touches the faculty the most. So what is ORSO by the numbers? Okay. So for the last 5 years, yearly average $900 million of proposals, right? We had 1 year, we edged over $1 billion. About 2,800 proposals go out the door. Yearly award average for the last 5 years, $212 million, so we're processing a lot of stuff. 1,752 awards. So what does that mean in terms of work, right? That's 43,000 logs in that My Research database. So, and here's our FTE breakdown, 6 in Pullman, 1.25 in Vancouver. Vancouver funds their own folks for that. It's great. So they work well with us in Pullman. And they are part of our staff meetings, et cetera, et cetera. And then 1.75 FTE in Spokane. Same thing there in Spokane. We don't have folks directly connected in the Tri-Cities, at least in terms of submitting proposals, because we let Spokane and Vancouver actually submit proposals. They have delegation authority to do that. And we've got someone in CAS now that does that Matt's helping with. So in terms of awards that come in, per grant and contract coordinator, that means they're managing about $28.3 million, almost $30 million of awards, 234 awards. There's a lot of things there. FY18 proposal and award systems managed. So this whole world is now electronic. So we manage 115 of things, and 9 of which have multiple logins. So that's kind of an interesting new thing that has happened in the last several years. The complexity has grown. Over the years, we've adjusted how these things happen in ORSO. Many years ago, we created a contracting officer position that handled all of these very complex things, which we still have today. We created, over the years, a sub-award management person that handled sub-awards by themselves. Why? Because the coordinators couldn't handle submitting proposals and managing awards without getting hung up. So we had to pull off some of those things. So that's what that complexity is. No money agreements, non-disclosure agreements, material transfer agreements. Jessica has more data use agreements than she knows what to do with anymore. Now she's working on global stuff, which is the foreign influence on science and security. It's completely, almost overwhelming of the activities that are going on related to foreign influence. Large projects. We're getting more and more large projects. Internet Global, as I mentioned, industry projects as well. And of those, we had 436 of those that are NMAs, NDAs, MTAs, and DUAs. Okay, that didn't even count the global stuff, the large stuff, or the industry stuff. In addition, there's all of these calls that come in to each of everybody, which is helpful to you all, because we need to be there to be able to answer questions. And you connect with us via email. Some of you connect with Skype chatting. I see Matt chatting all the time on his Skype with people. And we also get text messages. I get more text messages from Chris Keene, but So that's kind of us by the numbers. And then Matthew.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Matt Skinner. Casey, Casey St. Clair oversees our SPS group, and just have her join me here. she might as well give the overview of our team here quick. And again, we want to just give a quick overview, get to some of the things we're already working on from the feedback we received. Want to make sure we spend lots of time to hear directly from everybody.
Thank you for the introduction. I'm Casey St. Clair, Director of Sponsored Programs. So this is a small breakout of what our team sort of looks like right now. We have 4 teams in sponsored programs. One works on primarily non-federal awards. One works on federal awards. We've got 9 people, including our managers, on those teams right now. We have an operations team that consists of 3 people and a compliance team that consists of 4 people. In addition to what you see up here, fortunately, we've also been authorized 2 additional Fiscal Analyst 3 positions recently, so those will be added to the federal and non-federal teams shortly. The responsibilities of each of those teams is broken out somewhat common sense, I think. The federal and non-federal teams do the invoicing, reconciliation, reporting, auditing expenditures that come through on all of the grants, ETRs and SPARs, and we'll get into some of the numbers that consists of in a minute. The operations team is somewhat of a catch-all, but I don't want to downplay the importance because we really couldn't get along without them. They do all of our account setups right now, as well as a lot of the closeout volume that comes through. They manage the SPS email, all of our document retention, and the various schedules that come with that, and all of our really unique data digs. Those are very time-consuming, most often, as anybody with AIS is aware. And then finally, our compliance team is consisted of subrecipient monitoring, which is a really big chunk. Effort certification is a cyclic responsibility, and then accounts receivable and receipting. So very important work on the grant accounting side happening in sponsored programs. And that's it for that slide. Who has the clicker? Oh, thank you. Did you want this or me want this? Okay, so we also have a post-award by the numbers up here. In fiscal 18, we did just under 200 million in research expenditures. That's both federal and non-federal. FY19 to date, we're at 132 million, and that's tracking above last year by, what, Dan, 16%-ish? So increased volume, that averages to about 8.3 million per FTE to date. That's the amount of dollars that have crossed their desk. Active projects, we have 2,600 active awards we're managing. For most awards, though, that doesn't equate to a single account setup. We have 4,200-ish active accounts, and that's also broken out over the 16 FTE. That's the workload that each person in sponsored programs manages. It's pretty amazing, actually. And then finally, the last bullet down there, just over the past rolling year, we've done about 1,800 ETRs, 3,500 account setups, and just shy of 2,000 subcontract invoices. So again, really important and large volume work coming through sponsored programs. It's a great team. And then that's all on that one.
So we wanted to take just a minute. When Greg put together his group, he came and talked with Chris and I about this opportunity for us to improve some things on the pre-side. Then he connected with Matt and Stacy on the post side. We have another group out there too, called this P2 group, Pre-Award and Post-Award Advisory Committee. It has faculty on it and their administrators on there. And this was originated actually from Chris and Dan Bernardo. They said, we appreciate that you meet with the post-award group on a regular basis. We appreciate that you work well with the research administrators and have regular meetings, but we want you to connect with the faculty a bit more, right? So hear them those kinds of issues directly with them. So we've met with them. Hans Van Doggen is the chair, along with Amy Roth McDuffie, and they co-chair that. And we've gotten, this is a list of some of the good progress that we've made. And I think on this one, I'm just going to jump around a little bit, and then I'll let you jump in there. Just look on the EREX form, for example. We were able to get rid of this CISR form, cost sharing inquiry request form. And so we were able to get rid of that form, thank God, through work with the EREX. The other thing on that was we're trying to slim down the EREX, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in terms of the draft report. We implemented the narrative hold policy on the back of the Rush proposal policy, and that narrative hold policy has been super good for faculty. They really appreciate being able to get the EREX form in at a certain amount of time so that it's all done, and then we give them almost until 4 hours before Matt has to submit, 4 or 5 hours before Matt has to submit the button, push the button, and then they can work on that just a little bit longer. And then we've got, we worked out having these streamlined agreements, the CAP, which is our contracting acceleration program, but particularly when we're working with industry, we want to try and work to somehow get those through better, faster, stronger. And sometimes that works and sometimes that doesn't because of the needs associated with what that particular industry sponsor wants. But we have a template for them to look at that says, here's our process and here's our plan and our pitch. And then we've got the broad industry project agreement where those are smaller projects that it's almost like, this first little dance with industry kind of project, $30,000, $40,000, and we try and get it through quick, easy agreement, don't make any changes. Then we can get accounts set up and get something done. So I'll let you comment on this one.
So some other exciting stuff with the PT group is really a reflection of the PT group and actually really increased collaboration between the pre and post awards team. In my time here, I think those offices are working more closely together than ever before. The first one here was a really exciting change. We had some feedback that it was hard to know when your grant was going to end and some warnings about that. So working with pre-award, we were able to put some things in place to warn at 120, 60, and 30 days to the PI and the administrator so they knew the grant was coming up, reminding there's some things that need to be done at each one of those time places. We started using JIRA, which is kind of a ticketing and tracking system to track a lot of the work that we do on a post-award side for end-to-end business processes. Then collaborating with Office of Research, looking at our processes, we found there's places where sometimes grant accountants were keying the same data in 2 or 3 different places in the process and no one had ever taken it on. So working with pre-award, we were able to clean up some of that stuff. In lots of cases, we cut a full day cycle time just off of things moving from a pre-award state to being ready to now be in post-award accounting. That was a really fun improvement. We did some stuff. Everybody loved those blue pieces of paper that come around called effort certification. Anybody get to see those blue pieces of paper? Those will go away in summer 2020. Those will be replaced by Workday. That system had not been purged for probably 15 years. Late 80s was the last time we saw that the effort certification system had been purged. So that meant that anyone that had ever worked on a grant since the late 1980s was still getting a printed piece of paper for them to say what their effort was. So we did some stuff. We ran that for the first time in decades, purged, Garrick, remind me how many? Thousands, literally thousands of names out of that database. That might seem small, but that was thousands of pieces of paper that weren't flooding people's campus mail that didn't mean anything, that I'm not even working on a grant anymore. So that's positive. So we really appreciate working both with pre-award team and the P2 group. It's been fun working with them. So now we'll just jump in. What we wanted to do, we have that whole report that we received as some feedback and some opportunities and challenges. Deanna and I just went through and highlighted a few of those topics that we thought we could share on, and then we'd love to have a conversation about these topics and other things that come. So, Greg, how would you like to, should I go through this little brief spiel and then kind of open it up, or? Oh, okay, okay.
Is there anybody online that has a question thus far? Anybody in the,
I have a question.
Hold on.
When I read town hall meeting on research infrastructure, I thought it is about instrumentation and things. Is it about EREX forms and so on?
It's more about EREX forms, pre-award and post-award stuff, Michael. So,
Thanks.
okay, have a good afternoon.
Okay. Anybody else? We're losing a few. Okay.
Greg, do you want?
Sure. With that, I was just, you're still going to have to swap off.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, so I guess we can, if there are no questions, immediate questions, then you can continue.
Okay, so these were, from Greg's, group and collected information. These were the areas that needed improvement, particularly in Orso. And we could clearly see that there was a difference between the Rex form, right, and processing the Rex form, which are two different things. And so there was some suggestions about shortening the form, splitting the contact list, and I can explain that as needed. And then the routing and approval process, options for routing and approval we can discuss. There was a need for consistency in staff responses. And Matthew, if you would raise your hand, who is our new proposal manager, is ensuring that that is up to date. And that's really a top priority for him because that was a topic that was like, well, that's not what your coordinator said when I talked to him last week. So Matt is making sure that that's happening. And unfortunately, but fortunately, we have an opportunity to train new folks because we got new folks coming in. Mutali, raise your hand, who's a new grant contract coordinator. And so we've got Troy, who's coming in July. And then Jessica has another one coming at some point, as soon as she gets to interview people. So that's kind of a little hang-up that we're at right now. Improving staffing levels, reclassifying and growing. I think one thing I really want to point out here, which I really appreciated in the report, Greg, I liked all this stuff, but one thing that really jumped out at me was I had always prided myself on us training our staff, and then when they were, hired away into the units in the colleges, I was like, I hate to see you leave, but you'll do great because you've learned a lot of stuff. Well, one of the criticisms that came back was, you need to keep them in your office so that they can be a central resource and expert for everybody. And I thought, I need to change my thinking there, for sure. So I'm working with Chris on trying to figure out how to do that. We're actually working on a position now with Jessica's group to try and move that away from what we've normally done. Improving contract negotiation, another thing that Jessica's doing. She's creating a team, and we can have her at some point talk about that if we need to. Delegate budget certification. We've had a real hang-up on this. Budget certification, for those that don't know, is when you approve, when you submit a proposal budget, it needs to be done by an individual who has been trained to do that. And we're the ones who train them in Orso. And we got really backed up, and it was a problem for units. And so what we want to do is we've got some solutions on that we can talk about on how to make that easier. Improve the feedback process. You want me to talk about that? So on the last one. So Greg, in one of his earlier meetings, said, he was very nice about it, but it was basically, I want a JIRA system to give feedback. These JIRA systems are great. Right? So, and we did. So it's up and going. And we worked, Matt and Casey worked together to make this all happen.
Why don't you explain it here?
Oh, Casey, do you know how to explain it better? Give it a shot.
Yeah, Ben did all the heavy lifting, so if you want to come up here, you're welcome to. Yeah.
Thank you, Ben.
You're welcome. Yeah, so we built a JIRA feedback. JIRA is a ticketing system that mainly IT groups all across campus use. You submit a ticket, the IT group can see it, they can troubleshoot. If they have questions, they can ask you questions. And then once the issue has been resolved, they can close that ticket.
For desktop support.
Yeah,
and that
desktop
kind of
support, lots of different stuff. SPS uses it, so a lot of RAs will be familiar with that because they'll see it for subcontract invoices, things like that. So we built an Orso and SPS feedback JIRA. So if you go to the Orso website or the SPS website, there's a feedback tab, and you can go to it. It's got some instructions on exactly what needs. It's got some instructions on, we're looking for feedback. These are not, if it's time-sensitive issues, please do not submit through the system, please call us or email us. It's got a link to the site. Once you get there, it's got an ORSO feedback, an ORSO feedback request type. It's got an SPS feedback request type. You submit your feedback, and then it will notify Matt, myself, or Casey, depending on if it's ORSO or SPS, and then we can. Yeah.
So just to throw something out there, one of the requests was for immediate feedback because the reliance on a phone or an email to a specific individual, and that individual may change, was part of the problem. And also, phone and email doesn't allow a managerial oversight of resolution of conflict or resolution of support tickets. So for a help desk function to be effective in what was asked, I guess, was that it had to be real time. It had to be the thing that people went to, the door for all help, not auxiliary. We want to move away from phone calls to specific individuals.
Oh, okay, okay.
I mean,
We
just-
can work, yeah, we
And
could
we
work
can-
that out,
yeah,
right?
We can work to make that, and that was probably just some miscommunication. But we can, if that's the request.
I mean, is that
No,
reason?
that's fine, yeah, that's
okay.
totally fine. If there's no email that comes into Matt's email and it comes into the Jira site, right? That says, what's the deadline for X, right? These guys are gonna get it and respond quickly. anyway.
Right, and that's the point. If Matt's
Yeah.
on vacation the day that there's a deadline, right?
Yeah, great.
Okay.
Good.
And we can change the wording on the website if that's what we need to do.
Yeah.
So we'll take care of that so that it.
No problem.
We can make that be more immediate.
Good. Thank you, Greg. So that's the pre-award stuff. Do you want to run through, should we have Matt run through his? And then we can kind of open the whole thing up? Would you like that?
Delicate little microphone there. So as you see in the report we sent out, for post-award, it's kind of nuanced right now because we're seeking opportunities to improve things right away. We also are working really hard to prepare to have a new post-award system in Workday starting in summer 2020. So as you look through our responses in the report, that's what you'll see. You'll see a reference to things we're doing right now or could do right now, as well as what we're working on designing for moving forward. So what we wanted to do here, this was kind of 7 major themes that we heard feedback on. I thought it was interesting, we heard this a lot, the first 2, about improving collaboration between ORSO and SPS. We appreciate that feedback and we continue to try to do that. Like I said, we feel like since ORSO moved over into the same building as us, we've seen just a lot more back and forth and working as we just can literally run up and down the hall as needed to work on things. And staffing and turnover, I appreciated Dan's comments on that because we've kind of felt that way before. We love to keep our team, but we had kind of resorted ourselves to feeling like, well, they get trained in SPS and then they go work in a unit, which is really great. But we're hopeful to do some things to help our staff stay with us longer and also to beef up our staffing levels. We just can't quite keep up with all the work with our existing staff. So some things we've done, we've talked a lot about improved collaboration. We mentioned tracking our business processes end-to-end with JIRA, the P2 committee, automated the budget load into AIS. That was one of those where we had just triple entry happening all over the place. So to be able to get that down to one set of entries is great. I can't remember how we're going to split this up now. Casey, do you want to take the next one?
This is delegate. Okay, so the next column up there is staffing levels and turnover, and it's been discussed a little bit already, but I'll touch on it even further. We've done a little bit to hopefully improve our retention, at least in sponsored programs. The first thing I mentioned in my own intro was that we just got 2 new fiscal analyst 3s authorized, so that builds a rung on the career ladder that wasn't previously there for our accountants. We hope that'll keep people around a little bit longer. We also sent people to the NCURA conference for the first time in a long time. We sent 5 people to the Financial Research Administrators Conference, and 2 stuck around for the pre-award conference to get a little bit of perspective into what Dan's shop does as well. Moving on down, we're working internally because we do still have that turnover to build standard operating procedures so that folks know as somebody rotates out, if you don't have that active handoff from who's rotating out to who's rotating in, there is a process already built for you and you can step in and hopefully figure it out with a written document like that. We're also building backup rosters for all of our critical duties and sponsored programs so that if somebody's out on vacation for an extended period of time, or if somebody takes a sick day and has a duty that needs to get done on a daily basis, we have a person named who's going to pick up that slack on the day that they're out of the office. And then as we move into Workday, we're actively involved in the design sessions, and we're building the business processes as we move forward into that as well.
So lots of feedback for us about the EAA, the expense assignment action piece of paper, the form, and expense transfer actions, which is also a manual process. And that feedback was spot on. It is a really bad process that we have, if I can just say that, and it's going to change in Workday. All that stuff's going to come online. That's going to originate an online workflow in the unit, move for approval, process through the system. I'm passionate about the EAA because as we talk to PIs and research faculty, that's one of the ones that's most challenging and frustrating to folks, particularly if they have a large portfolio of grants that they're assigning their time to. Because imagine that process. You're a PI, you realize that you need to adjust where your salary expense is posting on some of your grants, so you go to your grant administrator and say, hey, would you fill out, I need to change my expense assignment. They fill out a piece of paper. That piece of paper then gets approved in the department in college or campus and then eventually routes its way to HR, where HR has a team of people processing those. And at some point, that form gets processed. They prioritize their work based on pay-affecting actions first. And so the EAA is not the first priority. It's getting people paid. So then the EAA gets processed in second place. That finally gets done, and then we have to wait because the EAA can't process until payroll runs. So you could automatically have a 2-window week in there just waiting for payroll to run again before any of those transfers happen. So depending on the lab and the level of research you're doing, by the time that EAA gets processed, it may be already out of date, meaning that you need to change where your payroll expense got assigned. So we're super excited for that to come online, be able to do that real time in the new system. That's going to be fabulous. Accounts closing, we had some feedback about slowness on accounts closing, and this is what I think we'd say as a sponsored team is we probably deprioritized that a little bit over the last couple of years as we were trying to speed up the time to create grants and get billings out to reflect the revenue and reimburse the research expenses. So that's one we're a little bit behind on. Our leadership team and sponsor just tried to prioritize while mine not particular.
Yeah, your microphone died. Yep. Sorry.
Sounded so natural there for a minute. There we go. So on the account closing stuff, we've tried to prioritize to have our grant accountants spend 1 hour a week, which doesn't seem much, closing current accounts that are just closing up. Then we've partnered with Garrick and part of the modernization team to try to automate that process. And that's been a big win for us. We've been able to make a lot of progress on inactivating old terminated grant accounts. What number are we at now? So we've inactivated over 5,000 old grant accounts in the last 2 months with these automated processes. That's huge, huge on lots of levels. It means that no longer will expense accidentally be charged to a grant account that you didn't mean for it to get assigned to. It also means that as we move into Workday, none of that old outdated stuff comes forward with us. So that data cleanup is outstanding. Let's see, effort certification. Did you want to talk about effort certification? I'm going to invite Garrick Kimball to come down. Garrick is one of the leaders on the Financial Workday project.
So yeah, our effort certification process is super archaic. Many of you have seen the tiny little Bloom forms that get routed around. It's kind of funny, when they print, they have those little things that kids used to make bracelets with on the sides. You know, those little, I don't know what that paper's called. But every time I see it, I'm like, oh man, I should just make some bracelets. And so we route those out 4 times a year, and we lose them. When we were sending out all the unnecessary effort certifications, you can bet that many people didn't send them back because they're like, oh, I don't need to do this. I needed to do this back 10 years ago, but I have a new role and I don't need to do that now. So with that purge, we were able to eliminate a lot of that and just send out the ones that are necessary. I'm also happy to report that we just purged another 800 in the last month. So when we do another print, which will be in May, it should have fewer records, and so I'm very excited about that. And that's also a key critical item for us as we look to go into Workday, because every outstanding item we're going to have to convert. And so the fewer aired reports we can send out, the fewer items we'll have to convert. So very exciting. In Workday, it supports a fully online effort certification process. Very robust. It's got reporting built in. It's got a delegation process built in for investigators who would prefer to delegate that to their grant manager. And so what can you expect in Workday is all that paper to go away. We'll have notifications in Workday for when certifications are available, and an easy process to approve. And then I think the last key point that we're looking at is trying to combine the summer into one period. So basically reduce the number of certifications required from 4 to 3. So that would be one less form, right? One less item to approve. And so we're very excited about that improvement as well. And do you want me just to jump into cost share? Okay. And so another pain point with our effort certification process is if you want to cost share salaries, you do it via that form. But in Workday, it's totally decoupled. And so we're very excited about that feature because we can process those two transactions independently and more timely. So a very, very exciting thing for the university. We've often, in the history of sponsored programs, got basically asked, how come we're always spending the sponsor's money before you spend your own in those times when it's one-to-one? And that's not really what was happening. It's just because of the delays in us getting the cost share entries into accounting. So another very exciting thing that I look forward to.
All right, I'm going to jump back for a second because I forgot to mention one thing when I was on the staffing levels and turnover, and that is that Sponsored Programs has put a proposal forth to the F&A committee so that hopefully we can get a couple more people in sponsored programs to keep up with the level of research we'll be supporting on the Drive to 25. That was an important one. So then, okay, moving all the way over to transparency and communication, we've touched a little bit on JIRA already today. So what we track in JIRA in sponsored programs is account setups, invoicing subcontract invoicing and ETRs primarily right now, and we're actively working with the finance and administration IS team to help get all of our invoices built into JIRA at the moment as well. And what that would look like is based on a report that we run every month, it'll create a ticket for each of our accountants to close out a quarterly report, a monthly report by the due date, et cetera, so that that's all managed in JIRA and they don't have to look in multiple places anymore. That's just a time saver for us. As far as looking externally, we're trying to be more proactive about updating our website, letting everybody know who's working on what work schedules, who's assigned to what ag code. And then we hope to make use of the RAC and AFO listservs for updates coming out of sponsored programs as well. That's definitely one that I would look for some feedback on because we also don't want to flood people's inboxes with every single teeny bit of news that comes out of sponsored programs. So that's where we are. Do we go to questions next? I think that was the last one.
All right. So is there anyone online that has questions? We've been trying to monitor chat and email, and I've got a couple, but anybody want to voice an online question? All right, I'll field one. I'll paraphrase. For pretty much every other process, there's sort of like a 360 review, and in what we talked about with the P2 committee when we carried some of these policy concerns forward when we met with Dan and Chris, we didn't know that the P2 committee existed. So what mechanism is there for a continued dialogue rather than just a help desk, which is fantastic, but what mechanism is there for the broader WSU system to give feedback for a pre and post award support?
Well, I think that in addition to transactional and operational things via this JIRA, that can also be a place, right? That's one place. I think the departmental administrator is really key because they have regular meetings, quarterly meetings with what we call our research administrative community. So working with their departmental administrator, providing, hey, I hate the EREX form one more time. That can get to Matt, who runs those meetings, and Casey. In addition, we have the Research Council, which the Associate Deans of Research are involved in. So any faculty that have issues, and we get issues that way. In fact, we just had an issue related to an EREX form processing that the College of Arts and Sciences associate dean of research got involved in it and said, hey, we need to talk about this, which impacts the faculty of CAS. So that's another mechanism. Of course, they can go directly to Chris and to Stacy, or Matt and myself, but Craig Parks is also involved. And on our JIRA system, what we do is if an individual wants to, which is listed on a webpage, if an individual wants to provide anonymous feedback, they can send an email to Craig. And then Craig has interaction with us on the P2 committee.
So I guess I want to go back to this question if I'm understanding it correctly, but the process then still defaults to meetings and phone calls and emails versus a sort of a historical context of where you're heading in terms of a system-wide support. So is there a way of translating what you just said into a way that it would be more transparent to the university community?
Well, I mean, I would think that we could probably do some type of quarterly report. Is that what you're hoping for?
Or have some sort of
or a-
feedback.
Or a town hall on a quarterly basis?
Some sort of feedback where, like, for example, I mean, the question is, as people leave this room and as people, as we discuss some of these issues, how does the university community know where we are in the resolution of those issues or addressing those
Oh, okay,
issues? What's
okay.
the level of,
Well,
what's
let
the
me,
level
let me,
of feedback?
let me suggest this and see if it can meet that need, particularly associated with this report, for example, right? I'm fully expecting to be able to, Dr. Keene has a blog, and that goes out, I don't know how often, but we actually have reports in that blog that I can easily communicate this kind of stuff and the resolution of these things in that. And
in
include
both pre and post.
it will have to figure, yes, I think we can do that, of course, right? But I don't think, Stacy's out writing her blog every month. So,
Yeah, no.
right? So,
be, but-
No, you can tweet. How about Twitter?
yeah. But by all means, that's a route, because it's a vice president for research. So, Matt and I can put something together and put that in the blog for sure.
I guess the concern, just to beat a dead horse, the concern is that as an institution, we're really great at writing reports, and then those reports get filed, and then the instance or the driver comes back again in a
Okay.
few years.
Yeah.
And so what we're looking for, I guess, is
Okay.
and that might do it, right? Some sort of
Yeah.
historical context,
Okay.
some sort of indicator of where we are, a dashboard, if you will, from where we need to be and where we are and
Okay.
how we're making progress
Well,
forward.
and I think, too, we'd want to come back here.
Mhm.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Do you have any additional thoughts on that?
Anybody online? I don't see any more chat. Oh, yes. Well, yeah, I was going to pick you anyway.
Okay, so Kirk Pearson, Chair of Chemistry. I'm going to jump right into the EREX thing. One of of course, the most stressful time for my faculty and staff are right around the grant deadline, right? So trying to make that deadline. Super stressful for everyone involved. And with the number of agencies that we put grants into, those deadlines happen every other week. Just seems like there's a new deadline. And one of the main stresses, of course, is trying to get the ERECs in on time so that we don't have to get into the rush and all this thing. And I really appreciate trying to simplify the ERECs. But I'd like to put out a more radical suggestion for the ERECs form is to revert it back to what I think is its actual original intent, is as an internal budget document. And for the most part, for I think 99% of all proposals, the dominant information in there that's contained, that's important, I'll say that's important in air quotes, is the budgetary type information, cost share, the actual budget, F&A splits, all this sort of stuff. That information could be obtained on, say, day 2 when a PI, myself, or one of my faculty decide, I'm going to submit a proposal to DOE. I have a title, I have collaborators. I should be able to make that EREX on day 1. Let's make a budget. So I'll give my staff person that I need a budget for 2 graduate students, a postdoc, an external collaborator. Let's make a budget, put together the EREX. EREX gets filed in week 1 of a proposal. And then when it comes down, the only deadline I have to worry about, or my faculty have to worry about, or my staff, is the agency deadline. And back in the good old days, I've been at WSU now almost 25 years. Back in the good old days, we had paper ERECs, of course, and I could go into Fastlane and I could put my proposal in there and hit go at 4:59 on a Friday afternoon, East Coast time, and my proposal's in. I didn't worry about any ERECs forms or anything like that. Is there a way to make that ERECs radically different? So it is essentially just an internal budget document that has to be in, and we can all get it in week 1 of proposal preparation.
I don't see why we can't figure something out. I think that over the years, well, for what it's worth, I didn't punch the NSF Fastlane button until I got the Rex form signed from chemistry. So just so you know how it worked since 1995. Okay.
True. I think we could always submit, I think, after the agency deadline, you as an SRO, you could hit go after my deadline hit. So I think you had like a week after my deadline to hit OK from the administrative point of view, I believe, is the way it used to work.
Yeah, the way, once we, on those Fastlane ones, once we get the SRO notification that says you're done, right, then I can click yes.
Yeah.
Right? I only clicked yes, though, when I got a Rex form.
Sure.
So that's how it worked. I think that I'm totally open to that. What has happened over the years in terms of modifying and streamlining the Rex form, back in the day, it used to be, longer, right? Because those that were in social sciences, liberal arts, humanities, are answering these questions about biosafety and radiation safety and working with animals, and they're like, we don't know anything about this. So that's kind of the one stage thing we did when we updated the Rex form and got rid of those for those folks. That's why you'll see that question on the ERECs. So all along we've been trying to reduce the questions, because there's all kinds of questions, right? I think now your idea of just doing the very detailed, or the simplified kind of thing, which is the budget, I think I'm open to trying to figure that out. The thing is that we use the data in there, as you can imagine, for us administrators, right? For when we have the NSF Biological Sciences Directorate come, and the deputy director's coming for a visit, and they want to know hey, Chris Keene, tell me how many people we have in the biological sciences from NSF. And so click, 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 and Derek gets it, right? So that's some of the downside, of course, of collecting the information earlier, but it sure helps later, right?
It doesn't help my faculty any.
Oh,
But
no,
it helped
I
you,
know
I
you-
know. But it shifts the burden, right? And
yeah.
I think, when it comes to pushing deadlines, I think my faculty have, I know we'd all like to say, I wish they could just get it in on time. But, it's certainly not the only proposals they're working on, and they're not their only thing they're doing either. And so I know most of them, if they could work until the last second on it, they would.
Yeah, right.
And I think if you look at things that have to be done for the proposal, from the agency point of view when it goes in, none of those metrics certainly matter to the agency, right? And internally, as long as you know the budget's good, the cost share is okay, whether there is any or not, then it should just go out. And I think it'd be nice if there's another way to generate those metrics that wouldn't be tied to the agency deadline of the proposal.
Okay,
Okay, that's the take home. Sorry.
got it.
Glenn, are you online? Glenn Duncan, calling you out. Are you online?
Glenn, are you there?
Glenn's here. He just stepped out of the room for a second.
All right, I'll pass it back to Kirk then, because I'm sure he'll come up with a second one. Okay, Lori?
I think that, Greg, one thing that you and Chris and I were talking about was the processing also of the ERECs, right? Was this idea of who needs to approve it and who should approve it and who has to approve it. And that's actually the other thing I wanted to bring to light. What we had changed, back in the day when, it was all paper, we required all PIs, co-Is, chairs, their deans to sign this crazy thing and get it to us. We did change that part, which says, I don't need all those signatures, I really just need the PI, right? And we auto-approve a lot of people, right? And then we don't auto-approve for, cost-sharing commitments by the dean, some deal on F&A, some equipment issues and remodeling. So we tried to make that easier. But when we get these rush, right, then the policy that was approved last year forces the chair and the dean to approve, not just auto-approve, right? And so that was a thing we were talking about. And I just wanted to kind of bring to the group to see if this is something that you want to consider, is when we get into that rush world, instead of having a chair have to do this, do we want to have someone in a department create a committee to approve it? Or do we want to have the faculty senate approve it? Or do we want to have, they're just throwing out ideas, so.
A delegate.
Yeah, right.
In that situation, as a chair, what chair in their right mind would ever not let their faculty's proposal go out to the agency?
Yeah, same as us. I would say, why would I ever
So,
stop
I mean,
that? And I've never.
when there's a rush and I have to sign off and then give an explanation for why it's late, one, I would never say no because it's late. It's like, why would I tell you've been bad. Sorry, your grad students aren't going to get paid this year because your proposal is not going to go out. Everyone's going to approve. And if I have to give an explanation why, I'm going to say, well, they were late. Something happened. And so it seemed like an extra step there that if I happen to be on travel and maybe my delegates may be on travel and this thing is sitting there waiting for a manual approval, and this PI has this $700,000 grant that's maybe not going to make deadline because of that, that's a disaster. It's a total disaster. So.
It seems to defeat the purpose of calling it a rush when you bog it down with more manual signatures, manual approvals. We should be trying to get it out.
Yeah, on time. Okay, so anyway, I was trying to respond to you, Greg, on that to see if that's an idea that, because Chris is pretty committed to the policy. So I was trying to see if there was some mechanism of being able to get it through better.
Well, I think that the policy is Drive to 25, and I think that the policy is anything that we can do to expedite faculty to submit research proposals, at least in my mind, as easily as possible, and especially when we consider the huge variation in the WSU system as other campuses grow, especially Spokane, right? As that campus grows, then there are concerns, and there's also growing pain. And I guess I want to go back to some of the concerns that I've heard. And maybe, is Glenn here yet? Okay.
Hi, I'm here.
Oh, you're here. Okay, Glenn, do you want to take it away?
Take it away in what respect, Greg?
Well, you had several concerns over the year for pre and post award support. I guess my question is, has the discussion addressed any of those concerns? Do you have any concerns that you'd like to add?
I think this is definitely a step in the right direction, but the proof will be in the pudding. Once these systems are in place, will it lead to improvement? I think a lot of the things I've experienced, and it's coming from my colleagues too. As a faculty senator, I'm bringing constituent concerns to the table, and I think a lot of the concerns that we've felt in Spokane is that the systems are just very slow and very clunky. Things that could take a matter of days take a matter of weeks, and in NIH world, speed kills. I mean, you can get a proposal killed if you don't respond quickly. And when you're trying to do a subcontract, it's got to be done, and it's got to be done quickly. Setting up service centers, those are just kind of the major issues that a lot of us here have experienced. So if the new workday system is part of it and new staffing is also part of it to improve speed and kind of get rid of some of the clunkiness and make it more effective, then that is a step in the right direction. But I guess we don't have those things yet, so it's remains to be seen whether things will improve yet.
Okay, Glenn, I guess just as a follow-up, I realize that you're representing constituent concerns, but you're also chair of a department and in a medical college that's pretty new. So one of the things that we had tried to focus on in that report is what kinds of things could we do given a more, a quicker time frame than Workday will provide, and that could address some of the larger issues. So have you had a chance to review the report that was emailed yesterday?
Yeah, I looked over it briefly. I think a lot of the things that are in the report and that kind of are being summarized today are definitely a step in the right direction.
Do you have?
I appreciate the thought that's kind of gone into this.
Do you have any suggestions on how we might continue this process so that it's not, I mean, town halls are great and everything, but I don't see many people here. And we've only had about 6 or 7 people email or chat in. So do you have any, again, as a chair of a department that's impacted by this, and from your colleagues in your college, do you have any recommendations for process that could help address these concerns? Because we need that feedback. We need that sort of systems view.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm gonna. I have a couple of faculty in NEP here, and also Hans van Dagen, who's on the one of the research infrastructure committees, is here as well, and they can chime in. I think, again, just from my perspective, the things that have been discussed seem like a step in the right direction. So hopefully the next person that comes along who wants to establish, for example, a service center won't run into the same problems I did. I hope that the fix that was put in place that helped me get over the barrier is going to be there for the next person. So I'm hoping it's not just a Band-Aid that, it allowed me to get my thing done, but anyone else who comes down and wants to establish a service center, they can do it because there's a efficient process in place. And that, I guess that just remains to be seen.
Hey, Glenn, this is Matt Skinner. I'd love to just follow up with you about the service center thing. I don't know if we picked up on that challenge and issue in the report directly. And that's not necessarily just a research topic. That's a mechanism we have in place to serve lots of different needs. So love to get more feedback about how we can improve the service center process. And just in full candid view, Workday is not going to improve service center setup, right? That will not have anything to do with Workday. So we need to take that issue and start to work on improving that process.
So I have a chat question, and it says, if the PI can provide a rationale for it being late, that, that's the rush policy on the EREX form, sorry, hold on. For it being late, that wouldn't suffice, and all of the approved people can remain on auto. So I guess if I'm interpreting this question right, it's going off what Kirk asked, which was for a rush proposal, if I'm reading this right, and please tell me if I'm not, why would the chair have to provide a rationale that's not being provided by the PI?
If I can just speak to that, for the rush policy, there are pre-approved rush reasons, illness by the PI or co-I or family member that would cause them to not be able to work on the project development. Short notice from the funding agency, university closure because of an unplanned event, and technical difficulties. So fast lanes down, ERA Commons is down, something like that. Currently, for those, they don't have to provide an explanation because of that, but the chair and dean still do approve, so I don't know, Dan, is that something you'd like to revisit?
So basically, it's PI gives an explanation, and chair doesn't need to add an explanation, just approve it. Is that how
And
you
I
were
get,
kind of seeing it?
yeah, it's kind of a little broken up, but I think
Well-
it goes back to what Kirk you were talking about is why the next series of approval steps? Right, what if the dean is not there, or as it gets bogged,
Okay, so
could
let me,
get bogged down in
let me
process?
let's just see if it gets bogged down first. Are you seeing that, I'm talking about Mitchner, just so you all know on TV, he's our proposal manager at Orso. Are we seeing any that get bogged down by people not there, not being able to answer correctly?
Yes, we are seeing it get bogged down on rush waivers, but we also see it get bogged down on other EREXs where additional approvals are needed for cost share per se.
What do you do?
We encourage the departments, if it gets bogged down, to reach out to chair, somebody who's also another chair in that department, or another dean, somebody above them or at the same level in that department or college.
So you're calling on the phone?
Especially on the ones that are rushes. For the ones that are that require cost share, and so the chair and dean have to approve. I'm not watching those as closely because we're not coming up on a deadline. But for the ones that are waivers, I try to look and see, hey, where is it in the approval process, and try to reach out. I don't reach out to the chair or dean. I reach out to the research administrator. To see if we can get that moved along. I don't always, it depends on the workload. So sometimes I have a hard time keeping up on exactly where all the approvals are, but I try as hard as I can.
Oh, wait, okay, let me run back up the steps. Oh, you should have seen the last Senate meeting.
Okay, I'll ask the hard question, I guess, maybe two. One, what's actually done with the explanation? When a PI says, why is this late? And the PI says, if PI just let, I'm late. At what point is that, well, that's not, at what point does someone actually deny that? I mean, has one of these ever been denied so far?
Yeah, we've had, not many, Kirk, but we've had some not denied, or some denied, and some not started, right? Because it was too late, and either the associate dean of research or the chair said, I'm not even starting this. So that has happened before.
There must have been cost share on that one, though.
So, in addition, those that on the answers, as we've developed the policy with the associate deans of research in that research council, some of the expectation that came down from the top, right, was the chair and the dean need to kind of help these folks if they're continually running late. So what's the impetus to help that chair and dean ensure that faculty member is able to, get these processes going better, faster, stronger? So there was some of that, right? And there was some kind of expectation too that we're all involved, right? Yes, it goes through the PI and the department, then it comes to us. And so there's the long list of proposals going out that day that we're trying to make sure that, these guys don't pull their hair out, and leave. So there was some sense of that in all of this that was built.
So I guess I'll go back. If the EREX was submitted, the actual budget stuff was done super early. And then at deadline time, it's really a matter of whether the proposal is ready to go out the door. I know back in the day, it used to be that if it was too late that you guys didn't have time to actually look at the proposal, you would actually send it out with a disclaimer saying, Orso didn't have a chance to look at this, it's on your own risk. And I think most PIs are fine with that.
Sure.
That's something that would be nice maybe to reinstate as well.
Yeah, well, I'm actually quite open to that. I think the one thing I do want to communicate, there's two things. Remind me about institutional official. These days, these 115 systems we manage, right? They're so precise. Back in the day, 1995, I'm looking at an NIH proposal, and it's all in paper, right? Comes in at the last minute, sign it, get it out the door, right? Because I have to, you know, and FedEx is coming at 3 or whatever. So any more these days, it's completely distressing because the file name needs to be exactly right in the RFP so that it can get through grants.gov and through all the other systems. So that's an interesting element that causes us distress, which is why we kind of want to move it back a little bit too, to make sure when we submit that and there's errors, that we can get it back and fix it and then submit it again before the deadline. You guys want to make any comments on that? In a minute you can. The other thing about the length of the Rex form is, as the institutional official who signs on behalf of the institution, I'm saying that that proposal's ready to go, right? And I kind of want to know some stuff.
Well, I mean,
Not just the budget. So are
Well,
there
but-
animals? Do you
but
have
you had-
hazardous materials? Is there radiation? So some of those things make me, queasy inside. So that's what.
But at the end of the day, they'll come back to the PI, right? I mean, they're not going to hold you responsible if something's not right on a proposal, right? And, I mean.
That's probably debatable. They'll just.
So am I clear that most of the discussion, and at least in this last bit, has circled around internal documentation for submission of grant proposals?
Sure seems like that's it.
So I'm going to go back to something that you and Chris presented, maybe it was last year in Faculty Senate, which was the expenditure plot that would have to be achieved were we to meet the Drive
The
to
hockey
25,
stick.
the hockey stick. And it was, that in itself caused a lot of polarization in faculty because it seemed to be unachievable, not achievable. So we have, and also I guess when I'm hearing this discussion, I get that these issues will not be impacted by modernization. Is that also correct? That the internal
right.
policies,
Yes. Yeah,
that
that's
modernization
correct.
Workday is not going to have anything to do at all with the pre-award submission of grant
Right.
proposals. So if there's any hope in hell to achieve the Drive to 25, the obstacles that present for faculty members to be able, independent research faculty members to be able to submit proposals as quickly as possible without causing your organization undue pain seem to need to be rethought.
Well, it sounds like that's the biggest pain point.
Well,
So.
and I try to stay off one-offs, but one of the things that I see also on some of the EREC submissions and have heard is, it's just sort of the same corollary with student evaluations. If you want information, just ask the students, like, how many hours do you work outside of class? And then everybody has, what was the expression I heard recently? Everybody wants to hang an ornament on the tree. And so in the EREX form, for example, I believe that there are aspects of the grand challenges, boxes that are checked for internal sorts of metrics, if you will, towards where we're focused. And so maybe that's one of the things that could be looked at as well, is what are we overloading that with more metrics, or are there different ways of getting that information that doesn't put the burden on the person submitting the proposal or the research staff helping them submit the proposal?
What I'd love, to be honest, what I'd love is, because we get these things electronically now, I would love our database just to, we have the file, it goes in, does some type of AI, right? Artificial intelligence grabs all the stuff. We don't have to do a form. That'd be awesome. So
It might be that there are other methods of gathering that information. Oops, another question online. There may be other methods of grabbing that information without necessarily having to do it right at the initial,
sure.
The initial submission. All right, so let's see. Oops, sorry. rush policy waiver explanation is only required when other is the waiver reason?
So those exceptions that Matt listed don't have that requirement, only on the other, right? Which was, I was late. Or I had subcontractors that, and that's the one I see the most is I've got collaborators that didn't get me his stuff on time, right? Now, I think I want to make sure I'm communicating, and I think that's a statement to us. I think what I want to communicate too is I'm not sitting in there in my office with a big whiteboard putting Kirk Peterson on there as he's got another orange, you know. I really don't do that.
I have that on my whiteboard with a target.
It's filled up, right? But I don't really do that. I'm like, these things happen. Just, and that's the policy that was agreed to, and we get in a system, and these things happen, and let's submit a proposal.
But policy is
I mean,
dynamic, right? Policy is dynamic
yeah,
to
of
meet the
course.
needs of the organization.
Sure, yeah. But I don't want to, you know, somebody to be, you know, a faculty member to be sitting there, oh, Nordquist has got me on the list. So I don't do that, right? So, for what that's worth.
Tell Dan the statement is from Sean.
Thank you, Sean.
And it was a clarification, not a question.
Got it. Clarification. Ask Matt some questions.
Do you have any questions? Is there anybody online? We're getting... No one? Oh, wait, okay. Can't you move forward?
Just stay up there.
Yeah, chat back and forth. Yes, physically.
So I just wanted, is this on? To address the chair and the dean helping the faculty. They need to have a way to know the problem faculty. I can assure you he knows who the problem faculty are because I tell him.
Yeah.
Also,
I know you do.
also, I want to talk about the 48-hour deadline and putting in good proposals that meet all the requirements of the agency. It's my job to do that for the department. I try really hard to do that for the Department of Chemistry. Sometimes with this deadline, Matt gets slop. He gets exactly what the faculty member have given to me. And so Orso ends up doing my job for me, which I don't think was the intent, but that's what happens. You guys end up doing the job that I should be doing to get that proposal in a complete submitted fashion. I don't think Matt enjoys that, but that's what happens when I'm trying to meet the EREX deadline.
Yeah, that's a pain. I can just understand.
So I want to go back to this because it goes to a comment that was on that Excel spreadsheet. And that was how policy can't, or the comment that Lori just made about problem faculty. We train our faculty and our independent researchers to act independently and run labs almost as sole entities. And again, I go back to this Drive to 25 and how we're going to facilitate that, because as we get more people submitting grant proposals, we're going to have more people pushing up against this. So again, I think policy is dynamic and it has to address the needs of the system. So it sounds to me like the next step would be to, because almost all of this stuff is around nothing else, EREX forms. Is that?
Well, anything that, I don't know, Glenn, are you frustrated with the EREX process, or Hans, or whoever's in that room?
I haven't had as many problems with the EREX, I think, as some of colleagues have expressed today.
Okay.
Hans?
Well, let me, not that I have anything very profound to say about this, but I think the, something a bit of a flavor of what has just been said as well, is that the EREX is not perfect, but the university has enough flexibility to deal with the issues that arise, and it has to because it's a diverse group of people with very diverse demands and requirements. I think the tension that automatically arises in automation and fast processes versus having a sufficient dynamic and sufficient flexibility to be able to capture all the different needs of everybody. And so this has come up in various different ways in this discussion today too, that you can't sort of have it both and all different ways. One thing that our university, I think, has always excelled in, and I don't say this lightly because I usually point out the things that are wrong, but one thing we do really well is that most of the time, we understand that there's going to be things that simply won't work the standard way, and that we find a way around it. And as long as we continue to keep that as a possibility, even if we have perfect processes in Workday and everything is fully automated and it's all perfect, it's going to turn out it's not as perfect as we thought it needed to be. As long as we keep in mind that there's always the willingness and the flexibility to deal with unexpected events, then yes, those things are still inconvenient, but we'll work around them. And I think the university has done well. I think, and I mean the people that are in the room that we're looking at right now, and everybody around that, have dealt with these things in a flexible manner. And I've noticed that when we go overboard with trying to make things policy-driven or streamlined, and we lose that flexibility, then people run into barriers. And then what we then do in response to that is we sort of step back and say, okay, that was the intent, but maybe we went a little too far in that direction, and let's pull that back a little bit. And then things get okay again. What we don't do very well is communicate that to other people. So what happens a lot is that something was changed or some decision was made and it was rolled out, and then a year later or 2 years later we say, okay, that was great, but we could probably do a little bit better. And then we forget that a whole bunch of people were told about the policy from 2 years ago, but don't necessarily know how we do business now at the current time. And I find that many of the problems that we sometimes run into are actually not because the system is broken or isn't ready and capable of capturing what needs to be done, but because people don't know how to do it, or they don't know the latest ways of doing business. And so if there's one message that I would have, if I had one wish that could be fulfilled, let me put it that way, I wouldn't focus so much on getting the ERECs sorted, but I would focus on establishing even better communication channels between people and knowing that and making sure that everybody knows how things can be accomplished in the current structure.
Okay.
And that is going to be a critical issue when we roll out Workday, when everything's going to change. And
Right.
Nobody knows exactly how things work anymore. Communication should be my number one sort of thing. And then whatever we call the ERECs or the systems or the JIRAs and all that, that's all going to be affected one way or another. That we will have to live with. But as long as we can communicate really clearly and really broadly, and recognize that we will have to deal with things that come up that we didn't intend or didn't anticipate, and deal with it flexibly, we're going to be okay.
Okay.
Is my guess.
Thank you, Hans. So in the spirit of that, I do want to ask a question. In light of kind of this ERECs, the RUSH proposal and the ERECs processing, does the narrative hold program allow an out to this, Kirk?
I'm going to end up having to.
Sorry, Greg.
Because they can't move down.
Does that help? Because that's what we were trying to do to meet the need of, I want the faculty member wanting to work on their proposal in the last minute, get the administrative stuff out of the way in those 2 days, and then they can have until 5 hours before. So what's the big need?
It helps for tweaks, but we still have to have an actual full, complete proposal in before those 2 days, right? So all the supporting letters have to be there, all the appendices, all the minutia of a grant, everything has to be there. At least a pseudo-complete narrative has to be done.
Do you want me to change that?
I want the ERECs to be done in week one.
You don't want an ERECs, but...
I want the ERECs, well, the ERECs serves a purpose, right? It does cost share and all that. I want the ERECs to be able to be done in week one. it's out of the way. And maybe you can do all the metrics at the end. I don't care. But the EREX is done on week 1. And then at the end, agency deadline, all the PI has to worry about, all the staff have to worry about is making that proposal as good as it can possibly be so that maybe we can improve upon this, less than 20% hit rate on grants.
So when are you going to get it to me to submit it?
At
That's
the
a
latest
thing, right?
day of, at the very latest day of course. I think most faculty want to get it done early so they can get out of their hair. I think a lot of faculty would like to get it done early, but worst case scenario, they'll get it to you to submit day of the agency deadline, right? And if we have
I'd have to think about that.
yeah,
one,
but
right?
I mean, or you could have this 2-week rush, but the rush is really on just a proposal. There's no staff having to deal with budgets and EREXs and, but I don't know. Get the EREX out of the way early, and then people can just focus on the proposal.
Okay, online question.
You can stay there, Greg.
Online question, again, on the EREX. Can an RA, what's an RA?
Research administrator.
Research assistant. Okay, can an RA please be, I thought it was something more sophisticated than that. Not that it's not sophisticated. Can an RA please be given the ability to waive the rush policy or something similar, especially if the RA has been working with the PI on the proposal?
Well, it's not part of the policy. If that person could email me or Craig, to understand some of the details, I'd be willing to look at that for sure. I think the nature of the policy was if it's late, the chair has to get involved and the dean has to get involved. So that was what the focus of it was at the time. So, and we don't even do waivers of rush proposals. Waive the rush. The system's built to manage it.
Yep. Yeah, it's hard-coded.
Hard-coded.
Okay, so I guess that the question then would be, there again, we go to an email to a specific individual on this. So I'm thinking that we have to come up with some sort of indicators, right? Some sort of process that is transparent and visible outside of just single individuals to address some of these concerns.
It sounds like the only concern is an EREX, to be honest.
I would say that EREX took up probably 50% of today's meeting, maybe, or the questions. So anyway.
Hi, Greg. This is Glenn.
Okay. Yes? Go ahead, Glenn.
Greg?
Go ahead, Glenn.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask a non-EREX question.
Thank you.
So I'm wondering if Matt and Dan and folks, can you talk a little bit more about research infrastructure issues? So, for example, things like service centers, trying to allow systems in place where that's a relatively smooth and efficient process, establishing cores. I think you both know one of the big problems I had was with IT infrastructure. I had to put my research program on hiatus because there were no systems in place that met the Department of Licensing standards for data security. Just those kinds of larger infrastructure issues that are not, in my opinion, germane to me as an individual researcher, but they should be something that you all would want to work out for the greater good of the entire university, because undoubtedly somebody else is going to come along and we want to make it easy for them to get the IT in place, to get the service center in place, and so on.
So let me just pick up on the cores, particularly associated with IT security. That's a huge deal, right? We got all these human subjects folks, or Hans, case in point, who are working on data that has PHI in it, personally identifiable information, PII. So those kinds of things need to be, have certain levels of IT security required. Thank God we had Connors come through for you, Glenn, on this to come up with it, because Central IT didn't, and the WSU Spokane had a hard time doing it. So I want to get to the point that Hans brought up, which is communication. I haven't even told you what we're trying to do for that, right? So we have had regular emails in meetings with Sashi Pillay and Tom Ambrosi to have a proposal come to the President's Cabinet about how we're going to handle just a certain level of IT security for everybody. Whether it's decided that the central administration is going to take it on, or if the colleges are responsible for it, et cetera. So that is, happening in the background. I wish it would happen more aggressively, Glenn, but it's not, unfortunately. But the other issues related to the other cores, I really can't speak to that because that's not really my world. We might have another one of these for that kind of topic at some point, Greg. You want to say?
Thank you for that response. That's exactly what I'm looking for. That especially here in Spokane, we're going to be flooded with researchers who have PHI requirements, and they're going to have very detailed security issues. So again, I don't want to. It's not about me. It's just about the people who are going to come along after me, and I hope it's going to be easy and seamless for them to get these things done.
Great. Second. Hi, Glenn. This is Jessica. I think we worked together a bit on this before. The other thing I would say is it has been tremendously helpful to have our faculty advocating on these issues. So please continue to do so. I know it's a pain, and I know it's moving more slowly than all of us would like, but I think especially some of the things that you've said and some of the advocacy you've done in terms of saying this is a stopping point for research. If we can't get this done, nothing happens, has been really helpful at making that move forward. It's just because of the way our infrastructure around that issue is currently structured, something that's been taking a lot of components and a lot of time. So please do continue to speak about that.
Thank you.
And I'd just jump in on the service center again. I think that's something, to be honest, we haven't spent a lot of time looking at that process, although it's something we hear a fair bit of feedback about, and it's something we need to take a look at. At its highest level, service center is supposed to be pretty easy, right? The concept is an organization starts on a location, they provide services out, and it should just break even, right? It's a self-sustaining operation. They provide their services to people in the campus or across the university. We should be reviewing the budget to make sure it breaks even. If it can't break even, then we'd look for a financial contribution from stakeholders to make up the difference so it breaks even. But I am fully aware that that process is not as simple as I just said, right? So it's something we need to look at. And again, I'd love to get more information about the experience that different people have had with that, because as we gather more information, we can look at our process there. I'm trying to be very respectful, but I also don't think we're real consistent in the application of our processes and procedures in that area either. So that's an area with lots of opportunity to improve.
All right, well, it's about 5 o'clock. I'd like to thank a couple of people. One is Glenn, who really started this process as a senator representing his constituents early in the fall, and then kept pounding on it until we got some attention. And I'd like to thank Matt and Dan, and simultaneously Chris and Stacy for stepping up and working on, and Casey for getting that report out as a starting point. And I think I'm leaving with maybe more questions than I had when I came in today. But I think that what I've heard that will really help is as a service desk that bridges both pre and post award support, and also perhaps some sort of move towards a blog or other sort of communication, something to aid communication, so that it's not individuals that can be readily viewed by the campus. And I would go back to our strategic planning process, where this is our mission. And so what we're looking at is mission fulfillment. How are we fulfilling that mission? So I think that could be a place to start as well. But anyway, thank you all for coming. And
I just need to make a pitch quick. Greg and
Great.
I have also been working, as we talk about Workday and modernization, we are trying to form a small faculty work group that would be available for us to run some of the new processes and approaches by. There'll be lots of things in post-award, such as how will effort certification route and get approved, how will we get budget to actual on grants, how can I get reimbursed for travel, just some of those basic things that happen in running the university every day, and faculty very closely involved in that, looking to form a small team just that we could come and preview concepts with, get feedback to see if we're on the right path. So if anyone would be interested in joining, we're trying to get that group.
I just heard
together.
Kurt Peterson volunteer from sitting all the way back
I
there.
thought I saw that. Anyway, so thank you for letting
All
me
right.
throw that out.
Sorry. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
This is the worst.